Morning, Madam Chair. Morning, Bob.
Good morning.
Bob, how are you?
Hey, Mr. Barros. Good to see you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chief, rather.
Good to see you. I feel like there's a couple of conversations you and I should have as we look at restaurants reopening.
Yeah, I'd love to have those. And I'm happy to have it whenever you want. I recognize how straight out you are. I'm not much bit different, but there's a lot to go through next week and beyond, for sure.
Yeah, no, these are crazy times. So we will definitely connect.
Yeah. How many applications you up to now for? I think the mayor said 275 or 295 a couple days ago.
Yeah, that sounds right. That's we're approaching the 300 range, and I think we just had an interesting conversation with some folks in Back Bay, and the conversation of hours came up, right? So as we restrict people's capacity, how do we create some longevity on duration, right? And I think would love to talk that through a little bit, see if there's something uniformed, or if we're asking people to come in one-on-one, one at a time, that kind of thing. We should just kind of think that through a little bit.
Okay.
Good morning, or morning, yes. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Or today, are you in the capacity of commissioner? Yesterday, you were in the capacity of chair.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh.
Let me see. Make sure I got all the counselors who will come in, and then we'll get started. Okay, and who do we have here from counselors? Just Flaherty?
I'm on, Madam Chair.
Yeah, no, I just can't imagine that's the only city council on right now. I'm gonna check real quick. I'm gonna send out a reminder text to our colleagues. I mean, Frank needs to be here.
He just texted me that he's having some technical difficulties. He's trying to join. He's trying to, I don't know, maybe he might be in the chat room.
All right, let me see. Frank, have you joined us? Frank's here.
Yes, I have. Thank you.
Frank. So I just have Counselor Baker and Counselor Flaherty. Huh. All right. Well, I will get started shortly. Let's see, we have Gustavo. We have Bob. Thank you for joining us. We have Phil. Okay. All right, then it looks like it'll just be the three of us. I'd rather go ahead and get this started. I'm going to do some preliminary opening remarks, just getting the, announcing what we're doing, where we are, and how people can access this. And then we will, I will go ahead and turn it over to administration. I believe there's been some changes in the ordinance for them to review what those changes are, and then we'll go to the panel. Okay? So just to get to those changes. All right, so I'm officially starting or opening up this committee hearing. This is Committee on Government Operations. Is to, excuse me, wrong notes. Got to get Christine's. Sorry. Make sure I get the docket number and everything correct. Here we go. This is the Committee on Government Operations. Today is June 5th. It is 11 o'clock, and we are going to be discussing dockets 0100, petition for a special law regarding an act authorizing additional liquor licenses, and docket 0281, a petition for a special law, an act authorizing additional liquor license for the sale of alcoholic beverages to be drunk on the premises in Boston. Believe 0100 was sponsored by Mayor Martin Walsh, and 0281 was sponsored by Counselor Baker. My name is Lydia Edwards. I'm the Chair of Government Operations. And in accordance with Governor Baker's March 12th executive order, we're modifying our open meeting law. Today, we're having a working session. It is being conducted on Zoom for public safety and health, and to allow for us to continue our business. The public way to watch this meeting is via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council-TV. It will be rebroadcasted at a later date on Comcast 8, RCN 82/Verizon 1964. For public testimony, written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov and will be made part of the record. both of these ordinances are home rule petitions, would establish additional licenses for the sale of alcoholic beverages in the city of Boston. The licenses authorized on these proposals would be non-transferable and would revert back to the city of Boston between owners. I'm going to stop there because I know there's been significant changes and in terms of the summary of as they were originally filed. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the lead sponsor of the proposal, or one of the proposals. I'll be turning it over shortly to Councillor Frank Baker for any opening remarks. And then Councillor Flaherty will come afterwards. And I see still no additional colleagues have joined us yet. Oh, Julia Mejia is here as well. Thank you, Councillor Mejia, for joining us. And I think that's all. And Matt O'Malley. So I will turn it over to each one to say.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, so I had a discussion with Neil last night, and I think what I would like to do is withdraw my proposal, because I think with the mayor's new proposal and what I had seen, there's probably more opportunity there for us to be more intentional about the way we distribute these licenses in the mayor's proposal. I was uncomfortable with the umbrella license language, which they removed totally. But with I think with the designation, well, John will talk about the legislation. You guys will see it. The way that we're able to, direct those licenses to MBEs and people of color to be able to open business. I think it will be a better way to move forward than my legislation. So Madam Chair, if that's all right, I would like to just withdraw my docket number, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And then that way we can just talk on just the mayor's legislation. I think it'll make the discussion a little easier.
Very well, Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I will do that. And so again, we're just directed to discuss the mayor's, I would call it the combined or the combined proposal, because you did speak with the mayor about it, and there are certain things that you support this combined version. Am I correct? A compromise, Councillor Baker?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I will move on to Councillor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Obviously appreciate the previous speaker's motion. I just continue to want to make sure I lift up the idea of being sort of cautious and judicious here. The spirit and the intent, again, the initial spirit and the intent of this was to address our food deserts, areas of our city that are in need of investment, and providing opportunities for folks to be able to open up a restaurant, a cafe, an establishment in the respective community without sort of that high barrier to entry, which is the underlying cost of procuring a 7-day CBC. So that is widely recognized and widely understood throughout this whole process. My concern is by dumping a significant number of sort of new licenses onto the market, we will have an effect very similar to what we saw with the impact that Uber had on our taxi industry. You can't give a taxi medallion away right now. So again, noticing and recognizing the need for us to move forward and to address the food desert portion of it, absolutely 100% needs to happen, and needs to happen yesterday. That said, I think that the volume is significant enough that there should be some concerns here. Councilor Baker's initial proposal, I thought, or at least his amendment that he had offered at the last hearing was an excellent compromise to address sort of that immediate need that some of my district colleagues were experiencing in their respective districts, and it was addressing the food desert piece. So again, I just want to throw caution into the wind here. Unfortunately, looking at the participant list, we don't have a lot of stakeholders on here. We don't have folks that have an existing license, and to hear from them as to what's that going to mean, particularly for the investment that they've made in their establishment, and what's it going to mean if someone opens up an establishment right next to theirs with a free license. and the sort of the competitive disadvantage they're now going to be in on the pricing of their cocktails and pricing of their food. And on top of all of that, we have COVID-19 and the devastating impacts that's having on the restaurant industry, and the reality of which, and I know between Chief Barros and Bob Luss and obviously Chairwoman Joyce, they have a front row seat to what's happening. I have to expect whatever the numbers are, whether that's 25% of the businesses will remain closed forever. Is that, 33? Is it 50? We have no idea until I guess we get some of these establishments back open through the various phases. But I think the reality is going to be that a lot of these establishments are not going to, they're not going to be sustainable, in which case those licenses will now be coming back online and at would appear would be a reduced price. And or to Madam Chair of the Government Ops Committee, your suggestion a couple of weeks ago, I wish we were sort of dealing with that at the same time as we're dealing with this, had a very creative solution around potentially allowing the city to be in a position to buy back these licenses. And, and I know Commissioner Joyce testified to sort of the intricacies and some of the complications around sort of that model, but nonetheless, I mean, it just, again, these ideas and the underlying theme being that if we put an overabundance of licenses on the market, it will have an adverse impact on existing license holders as well as prospective new holders. And that's it. I just don't want to be the skunk at the party, if you will, but I just want to raise a very serious concern, and it's an economic concern. It's a judicious concern, while recognizing the underlying theme as to how this started in the very beginning, which was on the equity side in addressing food deserts in our city. And if there's a way that we could solve all of that in one without sort of, I guess, putting an over abundance of licenses on the street, that would be great. There are some neighborhoods, mine included, think that there's too many liquor licenses and that we have enough alcohol establishments, but that's conversation for another time. So that's it. I appreciate it, Madam Chair. And again, I just want everyone to be cautious when we make these decisions.
Thank you. Before we continue on with opening statements, I want to let folks know that we've been joined by Councillor Bach. Also, I would like to read into the record a letter from President Kim Janey. Dear Chairwoman Edwards, due to pre-existing commitment, I will be late for today's working session on dockets 0100 and 0281. I hope to join as soon as I can, and I look forward to working with you and my colleagues on how we can support restaurants in our communities. I'm grateful for the work and partnership of the various city departments on these critical issues. And in case I cannot make it, I look forward to reviewing the tape. Sincerely, Kim Janey, Boston City Council President. So I will now turn it over to Councillor Mejia. Councillor Mejia. Councillor Mejia, I see you. I don't know, maybe it's a technical difficulty, so I will wait. Do I hear you, Councillor Mejia? Oh, I see that you're, okay. Councillor Mejia, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm not sure. I'm having some technical difficulties.
Yes.
Can you, I'm sorry, I don't know what's happening with my internet. I can't, can you go to the next person and then I'll
Absolutely. Well, we see you and hear you just fine. Well, we will absolutely do that. I don't know if Councillor O'Malley is still here. I saw him briefly. He may have had to step away. So what I will do is go to Councillor Bach.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. Glad to be here today. I obviously, I think we've got a couple pieces of legislation in front of us. One concern just of mine as a District 8 councillor is the question of whether Mission Hill is in this or not. And partly I'm interested in understanding, because I think the two different documents I've got in front of me, one has it and one doesn't. And then also feeling very much like I need to have more of a conversation with all the stakeholders in that neighborhood. I think a lot of the neighborhoods I represent are some of the neighborhoods that have a real concentration of liquor licenses in the city, right? So Back Bay, Beacon Hill, all the way down to, around the Garden, around Fenway. But Mission Hill's in more of this spot where it has been a challenge for restaurants opening, and kind of you have more of a neighborhood restaurant ecosystem. So from a very particular perspective, that's one thing that's in my head. And then I think an overall concern I have, and I'd love to, hear the administration speak to it, and also the sponsors, is just, I think as Councilor Flaherty alluded to, we had a hearing last week or 2 weeks ago, time is sort of flying, about Councilor Edwards's proposal. And it does seem to me like this is a whole market and ecosystem that is like going through a cataclysmic shock right now, and that we have to, think about how we reset it on the other side. And so what opportunities there are to reset it in a more equitable fashion, and a fashion that works better going forward. So I just want to make sure that we aren't sort of floating too many piecemeal pieces of legislation around liquor licenses that don't necessarily cohere into a whole to meet the moment. So those are kind of the questions in my headspace, but I will confess to having missed the last working session on this topic. And so to some extent, I'm here today to get caught up to speed. So thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And just by way of the introduction, both dockets have been combined into one compromise docket that does significantly change actually what is happening in terms of what's being proposed. And so I will conclude with my own brief remarks. I agree with my colleagues that this is a piecemeal conversation about a system that is, I find to be corrupt and not working for a majority of people who need it. Need liquor licenses. It needs an overhaul. There's no question in my mind that we need to change how liquor licensing is going on in the city of Boston. This home rule petition doesn't change that. All it does is continue to add to the system and create some additional licenses, but it doesn't actually change the real issue, which I feel that it should not be an asset. It should not be something that people can buy and trade and sell. It should simply be permission to do. Now, we inherited this system. So ultimately, we're not, I think we're responsible for helping to change and reform it. I look forward to one day a home rule petition literally saying we're going to overhaul this, and we're going to ask the state to get out of the way and allow for Boston to control its own licensing. That's a true reform. We haven't had that proposed yet. So we're here today joined by several industry folks. I wanted to answer, Council Flaherty did invite individual business owners to come who need licenses. Also those who oppose the giving out of all liquor licenses, but after speaking with, it was Donato from Donato federally, speaking with him at length, he is very much concerned about giving out neighborhood-based all liquor licenses, but he is less concerned and could tolerate beer and wine, no cordials, on the neighborhood label, at the neighborhood level. So he asked that I say that, and we did speak, and he is a constituent of mine, and he owns and is part of a family that owns several restaurants, but that was what he wanted to have said on the record. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to the administration to break down the compromise legislation between Mayor Walsh and Frank Baker. They'll break down the changes, and then we will turn it over to those in the industry to respond or ask any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the councilors for the opportunity to address you today on the matter of additional liquor licenses for our neighborhood. In fact, so for the record, my name is John Barrows. I'm Chief of Economic Development for the City of Boston. For the record, Mayor Walsh set out with the purpose of addressing both the food deserts, but also the inequities that exist in the distribution of liquor licenses through our city. And so what I do want to do is thank Councilor Baker for the continuous conversation and reaching a combined proposal here. And I want to sort of detail the way we are proposing this moves forward. Before that, I do want to acknowledge the context that we're in. I want to acknowledge the concerns raised by the industry and industry representatives that are on this call today, given the COVID situation, given the fact that restaurants are struggling. Restaurants have been ordered to close except for delivery and takeout. Given the fact that we have great fear that many will not reopen, and that we are trying hard to help, in fact, keep a vital part of our economy alive and help them thrive as we reopen into a new post-COVID economic reality. We understand, and we don't tend to make that more difficult, right? And so, although I would disagree that this is anything like an entry of Uber into the transportation space, which created maybe 500% more supply of cars. This was actually a smaller percentage of liquor licenses that would be introduced into the city. We have agreed with Councilor Baker to remove the umbrella license wording, which I think will address concerns around saturation, where we will only keep the licenses that were proposed before in the proposal, and I'll outline those shortly. And we've also agreed, working with Councilor Baker, to introduce a new class of licenses. Also recognizing the context of our city and our country, as we all try to fight for more participation, equitable participation in our economy. We do feel that introducing a new class of licenses that would be restricted to certified minority-owned businesses in the city of Boston would be a prudent act, very responsible response to some of the inequities that we see in terms of who's holding licenses and where they are. And so, saying that, I do want to read where this leaves us in terms of what we're proposing, so that we're very clear. The new proposal will exclude the umbrella license wording, as I said, but it will include 5 citywide, so that's 3 all alcohol licenses and 2 malt and wine licenses a year for 3 years, with no more than 3 a year going to Back Bay, Beacon Hill, and the North End, and I think addressing some of Councilor Bach's concerns. Adding the language that 5 citywide, for a total of 15 licenses, that's 15 licenses in the first one. Adding the language that 5 citywide licenses, 3 alcohol, all alcohol, and 2 wine, malt and wine a year for businesses certified as minority owned business enterprises by the city of Boston. 5 per year for 3 years for a total of 15. Then it would be the 5 licenses per year for each of the following neighborhoods: Dorchester, East Boston, Hyde Park, Jamaica Plain, Mattapan, Mission Hill, Roslindale, Roxbury, and Charlestown, with a total of 135 licenses. And then 5 licenses, 3 all alcohol, 2 malt and wine a year for main streets for a total of 3 years, which would give us a total of 15 licenses. And then addressing the needs in Nubian Square, 1 license, 1 all alcohol license for a business in the Bruce Boland Municipal Building in Roxbury, and then 1 all alcohol license for the Huntington Theater as they try to rebuild that theater in order to save it. And then 1 all alcohol license for the Boston Center for the Arts in the South End, with the same challenge in trying to survive as a theater. That is our new proposal, and I just want to thank all of the input, and we've heard you guys loud and clear on some of the concerns, and we hope that this new proposal provides us a way forward in addressing both equity and food deserts in our neighborhoods.
Thank you very much. As I stated, well, first, I believe we've been joined by Councilor Wu as well. And Councilor Wu, we had a brief opening statements. I didn't know if you wanted to go ahead and say anything.
No, I'm fine. Thank you. Sorry for being late.
No problem. So as I stated, instead of going directly to my colleagues to ask all questions, I wanted to prioritize those in the industry to ask their questions or to give their thoughts. Again, we are focusing on this legislation, and this is different than a hearing where there's an overall opinion about, whether we do or don't do something. This is a working session, which is meaning that we are going to be producing some form of legislation that does increase the licenses. We seek your knowledge about how that legislation should be formed. But if it's just outright opposition, don't do anything, I will, move on to the person who is going to be here and ready to work. I appreciate the, concerns and opposition, but again, this is different than a hearing. This is a working session. So I have already signed up and here to speak. I have Phil Frateroli, Gustavo, and Bob Lowth. So I think of the three, Phil, you're the only one who actually owns a restaurant. So I want to start with you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Edwards, for the opportunity to address everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So this is the first I'm learning of the new proposal, and I commend the mayor and Chief Barrows for wanting to do something in this very difficult time for restaurants, as well as all the councilors who are looking at it. I think adding more licenses. I think the thing that we need to remind ourselves about is that in 6 years since the new 2014 licenses came online, not one business has applied to the Boston Licensing Board to open a restaurant in Mattapan. And that's the problem that we need to face here. There are still licenses that remain that have been earmarked for that neighborhood. And I commend the licensing board for earmarking those licenses, but ultimately it's the market forces that are dictating where people are looking to invest what costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to do in opening a restaurant. And I believe one of the reasons for that is that these new licenses, the 2014 and the 2006 licenses, are non-transferable. So when an operator goes to sell their business, it doesn't mean that that license will continue to be associated with that business, which diminishes the value of it. And it diminishes the value that they might be able to get financing from a bank if their business doesn't have a license attached to it. So I would just urge the city at this moment to use it as a reset moment and look at the whole pictures. I don't know if adding a third class of licenses will really solve much. I think we need to look at the scenario, the situation that we're in, and come up with something that's going to help everybody come out of this and be something that fixes the problem going forward. But thank you very much for including me in the discussion, and I look forward to hearing everybody else's thoughts.
Thank you very much, Phil. We've also been joined by Councillor Flynn. Councillor Flynn, I gave all the other councillors an opportunity to make some brief statements. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything. Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. I don't have any opening statement. I just want to say thank you to Councilor Edwards for your leadership on this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Flynn. Over to Gustavo.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you to all who are participating here. This is also the first time I'm seeing these changes, so don't really quite have the exact numbers that Chief Barrows articulated. I don't know if there's a way to share that out in writings, just to make it a little easier to see it and understand it. But
one second. Christine or Central Staff, is there any way to put it in the chat? Link to this in the chat by any chance, just so that all participants get it. And by the way, to all participants, I received this language hour before the hearing. So I don't want people to think that we've been mulling over this. I do trust and know that my colleague, Counselor Baker, has been working on this with the administration, but I just wanted that to be very clear. And I apologize, Gustavo, if
Madam Chair, maybe to be helpful, the total number of licenses proposed before was 184. The total number of licenses proposed now is 183. We took out the BCEC because we understand there's a license holder there now. And then we are splitting up what was 10 citywide licenses per year to have 10, but still have a half going to general and then a half going to minority-owned businesses. So the total number changed only because umbrella licenses were eliminated, but the specific licenses to neighborhood stays at 183, which is one less than the original proposal.
thank you. Back to
Just as
Gustavo.
a clarification, just when you say it's 10 per year, so that's every year there'll be 10 licenses that are released, is that?
That's correct. 5 general licenses and then 5 for minority-owned businesses.
All right. Thank you very much for that clarification. Very helpful. I had the opportunity to provide some feedback and testimony on May 27th during Councilor Edwards' hearing on her proposal for a buyback by the city of existing licenses and as a means to reset the licensing system. And just to reiterate a couple points that I made during that time, which I think are relevant for this conversation today, is that I think that there is, as a number of councilors articulated, this is actually quite a complicated economy of licenses and ecosystem that requires a lot of interconnected thinking. And what's happening today, both from the economic crisis initiated by COVID, as well as the challenges that we have been facing for a very long time around racial injustice and economic inequality across the city. The proposal that was discussed on May 27th really had an opportunity to provide critical and immediate small business relief to businesses that are struggling right now today and would benefit tremendously from that buyback model. Understanding, as Chair Joyce articulated then, that there are a number of issues and complications that would need to be worked out. I have every confidence in the world that those involved in this issue have the ability to navigate that and figure out those challenges. But that critical small business relief from a buyback would be helped today, but it would also reset an imbalanced and inequitable system to put the city on a path to a more equitable recovery going forward. And this is a matter of equity. The licensing system as we have it today puts tremendous barriers on many entrepreneurs, but particularly people of color and women entrepreneurs. And it's something that needs to be resolved. I'm concerned a little bit with the restriction of the geography, and I'm happy to be corrected if the new proposal, Chief Barros, I heard you say that there are some neighborhood restrictions. I think that one of the challenges of that is that it continues to concentrate, while providing opportunity in our neighborhoods, which is critical and part of the intention here, it does continue to restrict and concentrate those minority business owners in neighborhoods that are also predominantly people of color, and doesn't provide opportunity for a minority business owner who's perhaps wants to open a restaurant in a different neighborhood because for whatever reason. So a little concerned about that, frankly.
Point of clarification, just a quick point of clarification. Yes, I believe that all of the MBE licenses that you reserve, that are 15 of them to be distributed over 3 years, are all city. Am I correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
So just wanted to make sure. course, of course.
Yeah, that's really important. I'm glad to hear that clarification. So, I think that from the work that I do, working with small businesses, as well as working with landlords and developers to develop creative strategies on the ground floor of new development and repositioning existing development with my team across Boston, the barrier to vibrant, active places that create community gathering spaces for diverse communities is very much driven by the cost of opening restaurants, as Phil articulated, and that is a huge part is the liquor license. So I commend the mayor for leading this, going all the way back to I think January, and Councilor Baker for his proposal as well. And opening up more licenses in the city is really a very strong step forward. I'll leave it at that. I think there's a lot of detail in there.
Gustavo, could you
yes.
state the organization that you are with, or?
Oh, yes, sorry. Yep, my name's Gustavo Quiroga. I'm with Graffito. We are an urban design and retail leasing advisory firm here in Boston.
Thank you very much. Okay, turning it over to Bob Lowell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to frame this. This is day 83 that restaurants have been closed. I got a report this morning, 89% of the state's employees who had a job inside of food and beverage inside the food and beverage industry on March 1st have been furloughed. Hopefully, we're starting to bring some of them back because we believe, although we'll find out tomorrow, we're on the precipice of a reopening plan that will start outside. And as Chief Barrows knows, and he and I were talking before this meeting, Commissioner Joyce knows as well, very, very few of these establishments have any space outside today. And what the ones that do have typically very limited space. As of today, my best intel has 3,600 of 16,000 restaurants that started on March 1st that are permanently closed. We will not know if that number is true. Some of them may be reporting that. So until we get the ability to reopen, I can't state that that is absolutely true. And I suspect that it is going to grow exponentially as we go forward.
Bob, can you say that? Sorry, Madam Chair. Bob, can you say that number one more time? Was it 3,600 out of 16,000?
3,600 out of 16,000. I get that from Council Baker. I get that from two different sources, and they were basically within 100 of each other. So I picked the midpoint, which was broadline distributors who have been in contact with the restaurants, who have then reported to me that these places will not reopen. As I met with the governor's reopening advisory board on numerous occasions, I identified the fact that out of all areas of Massachusetts, my gravest concern is Boston. And honestly, it's going to be Cape Cod. And I'll get to Cape Cod in a second because it really doesn't matter here. Well, Cape Cod is the second densest area for restaurants in the state. It also, as we all know, has a very short season. It also has, even though we have a lot of unemployed folks right now, they just don't have a lot of workers that live down there and have always relied on H-2B visas, and none of those folks are going to get here this year. So that's the Cape problem. Boston has a very major issue going forward. Chief Barrows is aware of this. My guess is most restaurants will not reopen in Boston till far later in this process. Simple reason is we have the densest amount of restaurants in the state, and we have 0 traffic drivers to fill those seats, to create that demand as we go forward. This week, businesses, offices could reopen in Boston. As we know, virtually none did. Most people are finding out that they're going to work from home through Labor Day. The mayor, and rightly so, has been hesitant to say, come running back into Boston. We will have none of the typical drivers that we have. I mean, Boston gets by in the summertime with tourism, won't happen. Sports won't happen. Colleges and universities closed down. Culture closed. Business workers in general, nope. Conventions ain't happening. So there is grave concern of what is exactly going to happen in Boston. And it's the exact opposite of what we normally see. Normally, we see the suburbs trailing Boston in terms of being able to be successful in the restaurant industry. The exact opposite is going to happen. I'm working from home today. I could purchase 3 of my meals in my neighborhood in the suburbs of Boston. I cannot purchase any of them in Boston. There's no business meetings for me to go. So you can follow the ball here. Boston is going to lose an awful lot of restaurants. So that's the backdrop for where we are today. I have never, ever, ever gone up to the State House in 7 years here and said to a legislative elected official or any of their staff, if this bill goes through, we'll lose 22,000 jobs and 1,700 restaurants will close. I have never said that. As a matter of fact, it's always bugged me that a lot of my peers have. Restaurateurs were always resilient. They always tried to figure out a way to make this happen. This is not going to happen this time. When we first met, we said, and Chief Barrows backed us up, we were going to
I don't know what's going on, but apparently there's already a Zoom link. No. And she only has 15 more minutes left. I don't know what's going on here.
Counselor Mejia?
She was on another Zoom call, so she said she'd get back to me.
Counselor
They said,
Mejia,
but
could
she
you
only has
mute?
15 minutes.
Counselor Mejia, can you mute your phone?
The producer.
All right.
Okay. She actually just emailed me.
So I don't.
Okay, so sorry. Please continue.
Okay, well, I think I've talked about the direness of it. Look, I can't comment on something I've never seen. You got it an hour before. So a working session on something that I haven't seen doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. And I'm going to leave it as that. Again, I will tell you, I am disappointed that the council decided to go forward with this today, given the situation at hand. We are in the middle of a crisis, and especially people like Chief Barrows, and I'm not trying to say myself, but right now I'm trying to get an entire industry open, and I'm spending a couple hours here on this. This is an important subject, all right? But leaders have to make broad decisions that make sense. To go forward with something in the middle of this, given the backdrop of what's happening to the industry, given the importance of what people have to do to protect the citizens of Boston, get businesses back open, keep people safe, to tie us up here now doesn't make sense to me. And I would have looked for us to say, you know what, even though this is scheduled, we got to take a time out. We'll come back to it. It's really important. But to go forward with it today, I think and again, especially given that we're supposed to be talking about something that I haven't even seen, doesn't make any sense to me. And again, I think I would have expected more from the council to sort of say, you know what, we've got to table this for now and revisit it. And again, let people like Chief Barrows do what we have to do right now to make sure we keep the city safe. So that being said, I will finish with the same comment that I've made always. I'm fully supportive of finding ways to find licenses for the food deserts. And this goes back to Councilor Presley back then's original proposal. We've always been for that. We certainly get uptight when it's across the full city. You stated that we're not here to discuss that, so I'm not going to discuss it. I'm just going to go on the record to say we've always supported proposals that would help fill in the neighborhoods that desperately need it. So with that, I'll stop.
So we're going to go through, now that we've heard from industry and from the administration, I figure at this point, I'm sorry, we've also been joined by Councilor Kim Janey and also, I think, Councilor Sabi George. You still there? Yes, okay, good. And so I had allowed my other colleagues to have some brief opening remarks. So I wanted to give that opportunity to Councilor, it's actually in order of arrival, it was Councilor Sabi George and then Councilor Janey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did arrive late. I don't have opening comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Janey.
Yes, I apologize for being late. I've come in on the tail end of some comments, so I feel I'm at a disadvantage here. I do think in terms of understanding where we are in the conversation, I do think this is an important conversation, and I think we have to be strategic and intentional when it comes to helping Black and Brown restaurant owners. And if this is part of that strategy, then I think that is this is the right conversation to be having. Again, I'm coming in midway, so I think I need to review the tape before commenting on what I just heard.
Thank you very much. So what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and go through by order of arrival, some questions, thoughts, and this can go now to the industry folks as well as the administration. I think that oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Flynn, I did recognize you. Am I correct? Or if I didn't, I apologize. I did, okay. So wanted to make sure that we go through this. And so I will be the last one, but we'll start again with Councilor Baker. Any questions to anybody that has spoken? You have the floor.
Probably more just comments than questions, Madam Chair. And Bob, I understand where you're coming from. I was a small business owner also. My focus on this was more the surrounding neighborhoods, you know, Dorchester, Mattapan, places that don't have restaurants. We don't have street life. So that was my concern. But I think the mayor's legislation, and I do have some concerns around the citywide licenses and flooding markets and that sort of stuff. But if the opportunity is here to grant licenses to minority-owned or women-owned businesses to be able to go into some place and open up, I think that is part of the conversation we should be having here now also. And the reality is, like you said, Bob, business is going to have a difficult time staying open, never mind opening their doors new and fresh. So my concern is that we don't get anything up to the State House and we're left flat-footed. I hear you when you say that we shouldn't be having this, and there's a big part of me that agrees with that. But we have to look, what we're doing here is going to play out in 6 months or in a year. And if we don't do this now, then we're not prepared for that 6 months or a year down the line. And there's a lot of people that aren't capitalized like the way, you know, some of the, you know, big name restaurants or even the restaurant group. So I think this is a way for us to give more opportunity to people. So that's about all I want to say, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go on to Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Obviously, just for the record, my preference would be that we would identify the food deserts and then we would and then allocate the licenses based on that need as opposed to sort of throwing a significant amount onto the open market, sort of devaluing, if you will, the existing licenses. It's been, the concern from day one. Again, recognizing food deserts and addressing that need. What we saw in one of the latest rounds was that we were including licenses for multi-billion-dollar companies, chains and stuff. That's not really what the spirit and the intent of this was when it started. It was to address food deserts. So I know that we're addressing food deserts to some degree in this, but it's also very expansive, and I've got concerns about it. Through the chair, I guess, to Chief Barros and or to Commissioner Joyce, is this an amendable document or is it unamendable? And my concern around, if it's amendable, it goes up to Beacon Hill, it becomes a free-for-all, and 183 can turn into 303 in snap of a finger, because our colleagues up there will be looking to get licenses for restaurants and establishments in their respective communities. So they too overlap, with us as councilors. They also too represent, a lot of the same, the same neighborhoods we represent. So that would be another concern that once they get it, they can start to tweak it. And then also on the same line, I know that the convention center was looking for that. My sense is, once it gets up to Beacon Hill, it'll probably be added on. So, and probably very similar to what happened at the airport, where there's the master license, and then every terminal, I guess, gets to feed off of that. I think that was what the BCC envisioned. So again, through the chair again to the chief and or to the commissioner as to what their thoughts are on this is an amendable document.
Councilor Friday, thanks for the question. Right now, it is an amendable document, and love to hear more about the councilor's will on that.
And then if it gets up to Beacon Hill and if it's amendable, then they take, yeah.
Point of clarification to Councilor Flaherty. Are you asking if the final product as in the whole will be amendable? Or are you asking if currently right now the language on the table in the working session is amendable?
Madam Chair, I think you broke up just a little bit.
Sorry, I'll repeat myself. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Very well then. To Councilor Flaherty, my question was, are you specifically asking if the current proposed legislation in the working session is amendable, or does the administration intend for the product that goes up to the State House to be amendable?
That's correct. I'm asking through you to the chief, the document that we have, the
newly filed, yeah.
The newly filed, or the amended version, is that amendable so that when it leaves the council takes a vote on it, mayor signs, it goes up to Beacon Hill. If it's amendable, then every state rep and every state senator can add 5 more here, 10 more there, 2 more there, take away 5 here, take away 10 there, add this organization, that building, that group. So we start out again, I'm the opinion that addressing the food deserts is one piece of this, but putting 183 on is arguably could be gluttonous, particularly given what Bob Luz is telling us, what businesses potentially not opening up. That is a main concern and has been since day one. 183 is one thing. When it gets up to Beacon Hill, when the time that the reps and senators get through it, that the numbers could be in the 300. Who knows what it could be? If it's so, I guess the question is, if we're going to put something forward that best works for Boston, then it should not be an amendable document. It should be what we think is in the best interest of our city as city councilors and as the administration, as the CEO of Boston. We shouldn't be going up there hat in hand or leaving something amendable, and we're sort of at the whim of the pens and pencils that go to work on our document. That's sort of the underlying issue. We always have to go to them to get these licenses. That shouldn't even be the case. We should be doing it ourselves. We're the municipality, and for whatever reason, from way back, we've got to go up hat in hand asking permission, not just on this issue, but other issues. So it's kind of a little backwards there. So that's my main concern, is we're sitting here talking about, despite the fact that I have problems with 183, that has real potential to arguably probably double when every one of our rep senator colleagues, and with all due respect, they start picking up the phone and getting calls from their constituents and establishments or people that want to establish a footprint there. Then so I would have major concerns. I have concerns at 183. I'm going to have even greater concerns at 303.
Councilor Flaherty, I do believe the language as presented and proposed is amendable. It goes up amendable. But I also believe, and I will confirm this and get back to you, that if in fact it is changed at the state, it would need to then be subsequently approved again by the council. So any changes, I think, would need to be approved by the council, but I will confirm that with legal and get back to you on that.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Counselor Mejia.
She's not here anymore, Council.
Counselor, I think Madam O'Malley also may have dropped off. So Counselor Bach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess just if you could, Chief Barrows, sort of speak to the theory about the ones that are flexible in location, and just kind of like what the administration's thought is on kind of each category of license that the revised legislation would provide. Because I think again and again our conversations keep going back to the places where we don't see enough of these in the city, and a big piece of this legislation is about specifically addressing those. But then, and you know, we've tried to limit the degree to which the sort of citywide ones are going to concentrate where they traditionally concentrate, which are again mainly the neighborhoods that I represent. But I'm just curious, sort of what our thinking is in terms of having those all city ones there.
Thank you, Councilor, for the question. So as you noted, one part of this license is attempting to build out a food service infrastructure. And I think it was noted by one of the panelists earlier, that would help people convene in different neighborhoods, would help create jobs, would help create wealth in food deserts, in places where we have to, in fact, in our neighborhoods, create the kind of life. I think Councilor Baker talked about the kind of vitality in our main streets and in local business districts that we need. The other part of it, as you have called out in your question, is to allow minority-owned businesses to, let's say, for example, begin to diversify neighborhoods like the Seaport, right? The Seaport is a neighborhood where there could be more diversity. This does not guarantee, in fact, that a minority-owned business would be ready, equipped with the capital we'd have to do more work, but it does provide one step towards the kind of tool that you need for a minority-owned business to potentially compete in our hotter markets. And let me be clear. Bob Ludd spoke earlier about the importance of restaurants. Restaurants are critical to our economy. They create jobs. They create all types of economic activity, but they also create the desire of place. And Boston has become a real foodie town. As we've become a somewhat of a headquarters town, as we've created more jobs over the last 5 years than we've done in decades, with over 120,000 new jobs created for our city. A part of that, it has been the rise of the restaurant industry. Today, the restaurant industry is the third most job provider in our city, with close to 90,000 jobs, although many of them furloughed, as Bob recognized. It is super important for the quality of life. It's super important for the competitive advantage of our city. So when I go out and I talk to companies about locating here, when we try to recruit talent, the quality of life in our city, the ability for us to provide a place people want to work and live and play is critical. And so the ability to have diversity in a place like the Seaport is not just a moral imperative. It is in fact a competitive imperative, where we can provide the kinds of benefits that would continue to attract talent, continue to attract jobs in our city. So the intention and the strategy there, Councilor, and for your question, is to allow for minority-owned businesses to participate in some of the hotter markets of our city.
So I guess then, Chief Barros, my question would be, how are we, what will make it likely that these new non-transferable licenses will go to minority businesses?
So we are proposing a class of licenses that would be restricted only to minority-owned businesses. And so there would be 5 licenses a year in the new proposal that would be restricted to minority-owned businesses. For 3 years, that would leave 15 licenses available. We think that that strategy would need to be coupled with other strategies around technical assistance and other strategies around capital. And it's similar to any work that we've done in the MBE space.
And so just to be clear, I didn't miss it. That's not in the legislation we sent to the State House. That would be a question of policy at the city level.
That would be in the legislation in the home rule that we sent to the State House.
Oh, it is. Okay.
It would be as proposed today.
All right. Then again, this raises the question of whether I'm looking at the right document. Yeah, I'll echo everyone's feeling that I think in general, it would be good if we were circulating materials further in advance in order to have a working session. I know it's an insane time. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that as a crit. It's just like, it's, oh, I see. Provided that such licenses may only be granted to licensees certified as a minority business enterprise. Okay.
That's right. Second bullet of five citywide licenses.
Got it. And okay. Yeah, so I guess, so that's just my concern, is that I think anything that we're trying to, any way in which we're trying to address this specific issue, which I appreciate the idea that the issue is twofold, right? It's about where we have liquor licenses, and it's also about who gets access to them. And so something to address those 2 prongs makes sense to me. I just think that we need to make sure it's really narrowly tailored, because the default will always be that these go to like profitable, well-capitalized entities in central downtown neighborhoods, and that has an impact on our existing ecosystem, including the licenses that people are borrowing against, right? Which is one of the challenges of doing a piecemeal thing like this. So I may have to, I think I probably just have to look at it a little bit more, but I appreciate that clarification. Thanks so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is Councillor Wu. I see Councillor Mejia actually is raising her hand. So do you mind, Councillor Wu, if we go back to her and allow her to ask questions?
I don't see either one of them on the screen, Madam Chair.
Huh, okay. She just raised her hand
Yeah, Mahia's in the chat room, the waiting room.
in the waiting room. Okay,
Madam Chair, you have a bad echo and feedback.
okay. Fixing that and fixing this. Okay. Councillor Mejia?
Can you hear me and see me?
I can hear you. I can see you. Yes. Councillor Mejia.
Councilor Mejia, you are up.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead. We're gonna go ahead with Councillor Flynn. Councillor Mejia, I'm looking at you, looking at us. Are you ready to go? Councillor Flynn.
I don't see Councilor Flynn on, Madam Chair.
Okay, Councillor Sabi George.
I am here. I don't have any questions at this time. I do apologize because I came in late. I'd like to just go from the beginning and catch up and follow up with anyone offline. Thank you.
Not a problem. Councillor Janey.
Thank you so much. I will also review, because I think this is an important conversation, but I am interested, if time permits, if the administration could give just a brief summary. And then if Bob wouldn't mind just quickly summarizing, I just want to make sure I understand what that concern was when I first signed on. And it'd be better if I could hear it in the context of what Chief Barrows may have presented. So if there was just an opportunity to do something quick, John?
Absolutely, Madam President, and I'll be quick. In summary, the administration, working with Councilor Baker, recognizes the concern of the industry around the umbrella licenses. And we are proposing to remove the umbrella licenses, both recognizing the threat around COVID and recognizing the case made around being able to be more intentional about how we use these licenses. We are therefore removing that and adding a new class of licenses that would be licenses restricted only for minority-owned businesses, right? Now, when I say adding a new license, I think it was clarified earlier, and it's important for me to say to you, Madam President, the initial proposal was for 184 licenses. This proposal is for 183 licenses. The missing license would have been going to the BCEC. And it's not clear they still need it because they now have an operator with a license on site. The new class
That's
of
helpful.
business.
Okay, go ahead. That was helpful.
Yep, the new class of businesses, the new class of licenses that would only be restricted to minority-owned businesses is actually just a part of the original 10 per year citywide. So we're taking that and we're splitting it and saying 5 of those should be restricted to minority-owned businesses citywide, giving us the opportunity to allow minority-owned businesses, Black and brown-owned businesses to penetrate hot restaurant markets throughout the city and not just limiting the conversation to neighborhoods.
So 10 a year citywide, no umbrella, half of those will be for minority-owned restaurants. Other than that, the rest of the proposal has stayed the way it was when we had earlier conversation about it. Okay,
Yes.
those are the updates. That is helpful. And if Mr. Bob, if you could maybe again share just in summary your concern, that would be helpful. And I heard my colleague about whether this was amendable and whether or not it would still have that focus on Boston. I think to your point around process, we do need to understand if that's going to come back to the council approval or not. But I'd like to hear from Bob if he is still on, if that's okay, Madam Chair. Bob? Maybe he left. That's it for me then. Let me, and so in terms of process, we'd get this done, the council, the mayor, up to the State House. Do we have a sense of strategy or appetite? Like the concerns that Councilor Flaherty has, what's our strategy for dealing with that?
Madam President, we have been in communication with legislators at the State House. They're tracking this conversation. And so we will remain in touch, in communication with members of the State House. My understanding, once again, is if they make any changes at the State House, add, subtract anything from your home rule, it needs to come back to the council for approval. I will check, however, to confirm that and make sure that you guys have that communication. I'll check with Corporation Counsel, but that's my understanding. But either way, we are communicating with legislators of the Boston delegation.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. And I will go back to fill in the blanks on the other parts that I missed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I don't know if you all can hear me or see, but my hand, I have
We
my.
can hear you, please go.
Thank you. So sorry for all the technical difficulties. I'm just curious, and I've been in and out of, I've been booted out and brought back in. And so sorry if any of this is redundant, but I'm just curious about, this is in regards to the licensing board. It's one thing to say that the licensing board, that they grant these licenses, but that doesn't mean that people will apply. Right now, Mattapan doesn't have a single liquor license, and according to our hearing on liquor license buybacks, that this is due to the fact that nobody from Mattapan has applied. I actually have been in touch with several restaurants in Mattapan, one in particular on River Street that is interested in applying. So I'm just curious, John, or if anyone, can you just tell me what are the barriers that some of these folks are facing as it relates to applying, specifically in Mattapan? What's the component that's preventing some of these folks from applying?
Councilor Mejia, thanks for the question. The first edition, the first time we added licenses, we made them for any of the neighborhoods to apply at the same time. So first come, first serve. Mattapan, in fact, was not quick enough to get to those licenses. This new legislation would restrict a batch of licenses for Mattapan. So it wouldn't matter if Mattapan wasn't ready today to apply, but as you noted, that business that's interested, it then gives my office the opportunity to provide technical assistance to that business on how they could apply, what they might need to change in their business to meet any criteria that they need, and then do it. So this new legislation would put 5 licenses a year on the shelf for Mattapan, and it's not a race to who's ready to go get their licenses.
Okay, so I'm gonna put them in touch directly with you guys, okay, John? That would be really helpful to kind of hold their hands through this. Thank you for that. And then the other question that I have, is it possible to have like some sort of dashboard of sorts where people can monitor when and where the licenses are administered, like just to kind of be able to keep track? Is there possible can we explore that? Do we have the capacity to do something like that?
I believe Kathleen Joyce is still on. Kathleen?
Hi, I'm here. So you're asking for a map of where the licenses are?
Yeah, like a dashboard of sorts, so that we can keep track of, so that we can monitor the progress, how things are coming along, where people stand. Is there a way for us to kind of make that?
I can think about that. It's a very good idea. Would need some technical assistance, and it's kind of a fluid thing. Sometimes applications come in and we approve it, and then it goes to the ABCC, and then nothing happens for reasons that we're not aware of. Sometimes licensees close and they don't notify the board, but we can definitely look into that. I think it's a creative idea to kind of see what parts of the city are underserved.
Yeah, because you know how they have those little heat maps where you can, whenever something's happening, there's like, you can see. And also, you know how we had it where all the food sites were across the city. It's a tool that we can help keep track of where the gaps are, right?
Sure.
And then the other, I'm just curious whether it'd be possible for us on the council, if there could be some sort of yearly review of liquor licenses.
Sure. A yearly review of like how many we have?
Yeah, let's just so for me, it's really kind of like, how are we keeping track of our efforts, so if there was some sort of a system that we could put in place that helps us on a yearly basis, or, however you think might be the best suited, because in that way, as counselors, and specifically more for the district counselors, they can see who are the restaurants in their neighborhoods that we can potentially help support. I don't know, it's just good information to have. If we can figure out how we can review it on a regular basis, that would be great. And then I just have a quick question about that in Jamaica Plain was included in docket 0100, but it was left out of docket 0281. So I'm not sure why, and if that was a mistake. Right now, the docket has Jamaica Plain on docket 0100, I believe.
So, Councilor Mejia, what we're discussing today is the actual compromise.
Okay, sorry.
Legislation. So
Thank
both
you.
of the, okay.
You know me, I'm getting really eager with my, it's okay. I guess those are the only questions that I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilor Mejia. We're still, so in terms of Councilor, after Councilor Mejia, Councilor Wu, I'm just is no longer here. Counselor Janey has gone. Gonna go through myself and then we're gonna go back for any counselors. And I see your hand raised, Gustavo. I see your hand raised, Counselor Flaherty.
Yeah,
But
Madam
I do
Chair,
also
quick
get to
question.
speak myself and ask
Madam Chair,
questions.
Liz Braden, Councilor Braden has joined us. I had to send her the information.
Counselor Braden, are you here?
I'm here. I apologize. I was having difficulties and I had a conflict, so I'm late to the conversation. I'll just continue to listen. I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Counselor Braden. So the questions that I do have and the thoughts that I have around the proposed compromise legislation. Number one, based off the feedback that I had from one of my constituents, being the concern that all liquor licenses being offered for free is what really hurts a lot of established businesses more than the beer and wine being offered. The ratio right now is 3 to 2, 3 all liquor in the proposed legislation to 2 beer and wine. I'm assuming that's cordials as well. I'm proposing reversing that. So that's 2 all liquors and then 3 beer and wine, no cordials. So I'm proposing that. The other thing I'm proposing is that we do have language that prevents it from being amended at the State House. I'm also think that the offering 15 new licenses in the downtown area, which me and Councillor Bach represent directly. That's the North End, Beacon Hill, and Back Bay. Over 3 years is entirely too many. So I would actually propose offering no more than 1 for a total of 3 additional liquor licenses if there are going to be offering downtown licenses at all. I believe that the market is completely saturated. And many of those folks in that market who can afford downtown can afford a liquor license or to compete on the market as it is. With regards to Councillor Baker's proposal, I want to just announce to the folks that I will be, per his suggestion, we will place his currently filed legislation. We will place his currently filed proposed legislation on file, which means it will be tabled, so that we're no longer going to be discussing that. I do think it's worth an annual discussion, not just when we want to increase liquor licenses, but in general to look at the industry, which again I've said is ripe for corruption and is not the best way. We inherited this mess. But I do believe an annual check and review, as Councillor Mejia suggested, that we look at who has licenses, what's the market for them at that moment, right? Look at what is the chances of the market, going up or down at that particular moment. What are the chances of any other reforms that we need to be having? That should be an annual discussion, like we have when we are discussing the Boston residency job policy. We actually meet twice a year to discuss that, to see how that industry is going and making sure it's more equitable. We do not have an annual conversation or a biannual conversation on this particular industry or this particular this licensing system that we have. So those are my suggestions and proposals for the proposed compromise legislation. I don't know if the administration wants to respond.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for your proposals. Let me just say that quickly before I respond, that Bob Luz lost power. And so he was bumped out of the hearing. And so he wanted me to make sure that I communicated that to everybody. So I wanted to get that to you all here. And he's trying to get back on as we speak.
I'm back.
Oh, you're quick.
Back? Okay.
All right. I think we should talk about all of your proposals. I will say just on the one about Back Bay, Beacon Hill, and North End, there is already a limit on those because of this of in fact the council having raised this before. There's limiting language in our proposal, and there's no objection from the administration in further limiting. So we have heard you. We continue to hear you on that, and we want to work together with you on that. On the proposal to send it up unamendable, please allow us to come back with guidance from our legal department to you, because I do believe, in fact, you do have the last say on your home rule petition. So allow me to come back to you and give you that.
We'll work with you, but I do believe we need the restrictive language to make sure of that.
Okay, so, all right.
So
let's-
we'll work
let's
on
do-
that if we can
let's
get
work on it together.
proposed language.
Yep.
Okay, so Gustavo had his hand up, and then Counselor Flaherty. And any other counselors who have any final remarks or questions, please just raise your hands and I will call on those who have raised their hands.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to offer a couple thoughts that tie some points together that were raised through the course of this discussion by Chief Barros, by Bob Luz, and others. I want to support what Chief Barros was describing in the opportunity and need to provide more than just a license, but support and assistance to entrepreneurs and business owners in getting open, because I think it's really worth noting that the cost of a license is not the only cost of opening a restaurant. It is also the cost of purchasing equipment. It is the cost of paying for attorneys. It's the cost of paying for an architect to build out a space. It's the cost of construction, which is increasingly going up, even at a time when the economy is in challenge. We're hearing on a daily basis that it's still going up per square foot. Rent is also not the only driving factor of what makes opening a restaurant expensive, although it is part of it. So the opportunity to tie these new licenses, especially for minority businesses, to resources and support in the process of opening is really important, and I strongly support that. But it comes back to a point that Bob made about the fact that this may this may not be the time to have this conversation. I actually think that this is absolutely the time to have this conversation, and I thank the council and I thank the administration for the leadership in driving this right now, because I think everyone on this call, everyone in the council and the administration is very well aware that the disparity, the wealth disparity in this city between Black and brown Bostonians and white Bostonians is great, and is part of what will continue to hamstring Black and brown entrepreneurs from fulfilling their dreams of opening a restaurant. And we need to be giving those members of the community, those residents, as long a runway and planning time as possible to opening a restaurant that they may want to open when the conditions are right. Because as I just described, there is an institutionalized set of challenges that they are facing that other entrepreneurs are not. And so as much lead time as we can provide in coordination with the support and the resources that Chief Barros has been describing, now is the time for us to be having this conversation, so that I believe it might have been Councilor Baker said, so that we're not caught flat-footed when all of a sudden things are the economy is in a little bit of a better condition. We can come back to restaurants, and all of a sudden now we're having the conversation, and there's a ton of other things that are happening along the way that maybe distract from that. So I'm really grateful that the council and the administration are focused on these issues right now, because we need as much time as possible to plan.
Councilor Flaherty?
Last really quick point, apologies. On the issue of data and kind of mapping this stuff out, on the city's website, I was looking at it this morning. There is a really great data set on the website, and I can share that link if you don't know where it is. It's on the website that has a spreadsheet available that you can download of every single license holder currently in the city, with a lot of fields of further information. It's pretty dense data set, and it may be an opportunity for the administration to find, some support in making it more accessible, and then translating that data into a mapping tool. Perhaps adding a column for whether or not the entrepreneur, the business owner there is a minority business owner. So we're in a good place already. It's there. It's just a matter of making it easy to actually read and use. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Flaherty and then Counselor Bach, who raised your hand. Any
Thank-
other counselors who wanted to make some final remarks or have some questions, please raise your hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gustavo obviously nailed it. I think folks think it's just as easy as getting your hands on a liquor license, but the overall cost, both hard and soft cost, capital, investment, rate of return, and now obviously in light of what Bob Lutz is telling us in terms of what the future holds for restaurant establishments, uncharted territory, and whether or not people are going to sustain themselves, very combustible. So points all well taken. To our chair, I would be, and to Chief Barrows, I would be requiring through the chair restrictive language that requires it come back to us. It can come in many different forms, amenable, unamendable, but one thing that I'll be insisting through the chair is that we get restrictive language. I think it's completely unfair in 2020 that we, in terms of the mayor, the administration, and members of the council, have to continue to go up to Beacon Hill, hat in hand, to ask for things and for the tools to run our city and to make decisions that impact our neighborhoods and our communities and our constituents. And again, in 2020, so it would be adding insult to injury if we put together a proposal, it goes up there and then gets completely twisted, changed, and turned upside down on its head, and then we don't get final say on it. And the only way we can guarantee that is if we have restrictive language in that the chair had mentioned. So I would be insisting on that language. And then I know we have Commissioner Joyce, and not to combine and to add more to this, but because the door is open and because we have this legislation in front of us, does it make sense? Again, I'll defer to the chair, but does it make sense to address the beer garden issue in this legislation? It's a 1 or 2 sentences I think that we need, again, to control our own destiny, to allow you as the chairwoman of licensing to make decisions on what you're seeing play out and what we're seeing as a city play out in front of us, instead of having to draft new legislation and to go back up to Beacon Hill and to ask permission and then for them to change it and twist it all around and for us to have to watch it happen. Does it make sense in this legislation through the chair to maybe tack on something about the beer garden issue that would be a great benefit for all of our communities? And that's it for me, Madam Chair. I appreciate your patience.
Thank you very much. Counselor Bach and also Counselor Janey raised her hand. Again, any other counselors, please raise your hands.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple things. One would be that I'd agree with you that I think in the downtown neighborhoods, certainly Back Bay and Beacon Hill that I represent, I think we may want to adjust those numbers. And I'll also actually agree with Councilor Flaherty that I know that the question of beer garden licenses and sort of how we handle them in that kind of daily basis right now, and how to think about at least having some like things like Owl's Nest on the Esplanade in my district that are kind of like becoming more permanent summer attractions, how to kind of regularize that is a good conversation for us to have. And on the one hand, adding a lot of things into a home rule can make it more complicated. On the other hand, we only do this so often. And so I think I would love to just follow up on that. And then I guess my one question, Chief Barrows, was just having now reread the thing, is just to understand. So obviously our goal with the citywide licenses, the 6 and the 9 that are for minority certified businesses, like we've talked about, and the goal with the neighborhood ones we've talked about. What's the notion of having an identical number of just general open citywide ones?
Councilor Bach, I think we would absolutely support making all of those minority-owned business licenses.
Okay. Yeah. So it seems to me like we should. I mean, it just seems like any intervention that we're having here, we should be specific about why we're doing it. And I certainly feel like the reasons that we want to increase accessibility of non-transferable licenses are those 2 prongs we discussed before, and I'm not quite sure how that first set is addressing either of those. So that would be another topic for further conversation.
Thank you.
I think that's everything for me. Councillor Edwards, thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bach. I see Councillor Baker has also raised his hand, Councillor Janey, and then Councillor Baker.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say that I think this is a really important conversation. Thank you again for chairing. I wanted to go on record that I think it's important that we are creating these licenses for restaurants that are owned by people of color. So that's exciting. And I think the more that we can do that, the better. And I would say even more licenses, let's do it. But I want to come back to something that Councillor Flaherty raised, and I share his sentiments strongly that it's ridiculous that we have to keep going to the state to get permission to govern in our city. And I want to remind us of why that is. That is because of discrimination against the Irish, that we have to continue to go back up to the state to get permission because in that time in our city, there wasn't a lot of faith and trust in the Irish. And just like I'm hell-bent on getting us free and making sure that we are creating a more equitable city, I think it's important that we address that. That is rooted in discriminatory practices, and we should be trying to figure out how to make sure that we don't have to keep doing that. So I just wanted to echo that sentiment, particularly given the conversation that we are having, the broader conversation that we are having in our city and why these licenses are so important, connecting that to the broader issue. So I wanted to echo that. Thank you.
Amen.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Janey. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple points, kind of just throw them out there. If we're concerned about number of licenses being too many or whatever, maybe there's a thought of we lower the time. If this is a 3-year rollout, maybe we roll it back to 2 years or even just 1 year, so we know we're prepared for next year and we can revisit it next year. Just a thought. Don't want to overcomplicate it. But my second thing that I wanted to ask from Kathleen was, I think Councillor Flaherty and Councillor Bach brought them up about the beer gardens. My personal way that I think we should talk about it is separate from this discussion. I don't think we want to muck up this discussion here. I think we have opportunities I think we have a way to create some real opportunities here with this. So I would be hesitant to wrap the beer garden discussion in on that. With that being said, Kathleen, can you speak about the beer garden? So how is it now? I know it's daily licenses or something like that. What do you think would be a solution there?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Baker, and thanks for the questions. I would really want to take a look at whatever language people were thinking about sending up to the State House, because there's a couple of issues in play. The term beer garden is often a marketing term used by places that already have a full license, but now that these are the in vogue things, they will use the term beer garden to attract a different crowd. We are not giving out tons of beer garden one-day licenses, contrary to what other people think, but we are happy to take a look at it to apply the appropriate amount of regulation to these places. But the language I've seen so far that's been floating around the State House doesn't help solve the problem that is before us.
What are the problems, Kathleen? And what is it? Is it the problem of the beer gardens having to come in for daily licenses, or is there not surety? Is there not surety as where they could pop up there? I'm not really.
Okay, well, there's two sides of the issue. As a regulator, we use our one-day license process, which gives us a lot of control. If someone's a bad actor, we can stop issuing those licenses. If there's a safety issue, a lot of these operators that are more sophisticated are actually looking for a more permanent license to give them the predictability they need for their business plan. So they're looking to buy some of these licenses on the open market, but while those approvals are taking place, they're still able to operate as a traditional beer garden. We have everything from stuff on public space. We have pop-up beer gardens. These people are taking a financial risk, and a lot of them do have more sophisticated buildings and more sophisticated business plans. So there's this the idea out there that we're giving them out all over the city, and but we're really not. We're taking a look at the space, and a lot of the ones that have been operating in the past are actively looking for a full beer and wine license on the open market.
Thank you, Kathleen. And thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry to go off there a little bit, but thank you for this working session also, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. With that, unless any other my colleagues have any other burning comment, I see two hands raised. I want to make sure. Oh, Kathleen Joyce, you raised your hand.
I just answered the question that
Okay.
Councilor Baker asked me. Thanks.
And then Councilor Janey had asked or raised her hand earlier. So I'm seeing no other hands raised and having no additional questions. Just letting folks know then this Wednesday I will table Councilor Baker's proposal. I will be talking with the administration about the proposed amendments, about what they are willing to accept, and also the Councilor Baker as it's really a compromise between him and the administration. And we'll see how fast we can move something to the State House. I think that is a priority. I'm going to state that outright for us to move this year before the session ends. I don't think anyone's confused about the sense of urgency we are feeling to fix this industry before COVID, and then in general to look at all of our industries and all actions that we take that are either enhancing racial equity or not. And I think we have a sense of urgency now that we have not had as a body for a long time. So I can't imagine us not doing something to try and push the needle forward. I can't imagine us not trying to get us to a better place with some form of legislation. I cannot speak to the State House and our colleagues there, but I can say that this body will be moving something. So with that, I'm going to close out this working session. And thank you all for participating.
Thank you.